sports fans, and welcome to the Heavy Hitters Podcast, the ultimate destination for your weekly dose of sports excitement with co-host Darnell Duff.
Now it's Sandvin, right point with it. Left circle, Paul wants it, fires it, scores! Ashton Paul, welcome to Dauphin!
And co-host Jeff Henson.
Williams, blue line, shot, rebound! Oh, you hit! Score! Score! Morgan McLean! The Storm are AJHL champions!
Whether you're into goals, touchdowns, three-pointers, or home runs, we've got it all covered. We're here to bring you the latest updates, witty commentary, and a whole lot of sports love. So, whether you're tuning in from the sidelines or the comfort of your own couch, get ready for a fast-paced ride through the world of sports. Strap in, because it's game time on the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, I don't know. Whatever time it is, welcome back. Jeff, Henny, I'm Duffy, Darnell Duff, back with the Heavy Hitters Podcast. I'm still sad a little bit that we missed last week, Jeff. That's 2 weeks. I'm a little sad about it.
What can we do, though, when we're in the middle of playoffs right now, hockey-wise? Lots of travel for you, my friend, going back and forth from Dauphin to the Paw for what's been a really exciting playoff series in the MJHL between the Kings and the Blizzard.
Doesn't playoff hockey just hits a little bit different? Like, I know it means so much more for the players, but from a broadcasting perspective, I find myself just getting more giddy, like even on the road and just seeing the crowds and the atmosphere. Like, playoff hockey is just, I don't know if there's anything better.
Regular hockey is a 10, then playoff hockey is about 100 or 1,000 on the old excitement scale.
How about a double over? Remember that last week you had a chance to call a double overtime game? Mm-hmm. Could you... we got lots to talk about coming up on the show, but just one more about that. Double OT, the Kings lose. The Dauphin Kings, for those of you not familiar with the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, but how demoralizing do you think that is, Jeff? I mean, you push so hard, and to lose the game in double OT after 74 minutes of gameplay. It took that long to decide a victor. That's got to be heartbreaking.
It is tough. I can recall in my days in Alberta calling a triple overtime game. A game that...
was anybody left on the bench?
They were pretty tired. Let's put it that way. The boys were pretty tired after that game. Fortunately, the team I was calling at the time, Grand Prairie, won that game in triple overtime. It was a series winner on top of that as well, too.
Wow.
So that would be, I think, the ultimate when it comes to demoralizing. Not just to lose a game in multiple overtimes, to have your season come to an end.
Can't even
on
imagine.
A multiple overtime game like that.
I feel bad for all those guys that lost that game. But let's go on. And there's no time to be tired right now if you're National Hockey League players, teams that are battling for playoff spots. But I want to start, and we want to start by talking about the crazy race on top when it comes to points.
Okay.
Oh,
do we recall a couple weeks ago on this podcast when a certain somebody who shall, for the time being, remain nameless, predicted that Connor McDavid would catch both Nathan MacKinnon and Nikita Kucherov in the scoring race? And I'm not even the Oiler fan. Oh, wait, I guess I just admitted this to who made that prediction.
You did.
But I'm not even the Oiler fan out of the two of us. And yet I predicted McDavid would catch those two in the scoring race at some point before the end of the season. As of Saturday, all three were sitting with 125 points.
And now you got McDavid 125, MacKinnon 127, Kucherov 126. Now, I did not know McDavid was going to go off for a stretch that saw him put up 74 points in 37 games. I didn't think he was going to get 19 points in his last 7 games. I should have believed he could. Especially because I'm an Oilers fan. I know.
Your team.
But that's the thing. Every time, Jeff, when I cheer for my team, they lose. The Duke Blue Devils, who we're going to chat about.
We'll chat about that later.
Later. I cheer for them. I cheer for the Oilers. They lose. So maybe if I stop cheering for the Oilers and stop thinking Connor McDavid is some sort of wizard on the ice, he still proves me right. Even if I cheer for Connor, he's still going to put up a bundle of points. But I did not think he was going to catch, and with still plenty of the season to go, in my opinion, sure, he's 2 behind McKinnon right now, and Nathan has been fantastic with 22 points in his last 12 games. And what really impresses me about that statistic is McKinnon is a plus 15 in his last 12 games, whereas Nikita Kucherov in his last games, 9 games, is a plus 10. Connor McDavid is a minus 3 in his last 5 games. So the picture inside of the picture, perhaps, what do those numbers tell you, Jeff?
It's telling me that the Edmonton Oilers power play is obviously on quite the heater as of right now, where a lot of those points are coming from McDavid. But it also tells me that Nathan McKinnon has really evolved into a 200-foot player. This is not just a guy that is going to go out and lead your team in scoring, be among the league leaders in scoring. He has developed that 200-foot game within his own game. And, right now, I think probably there are some people that are saying, oh, the way McDavid has come back here, he should be the MVP. Right now, my vote for MVP is Nathan McKinnon.
Now, does Nathan McKinnon hold off McDavid for the points race? Two points separate them going into Monday's action. So it's real slim with still a good portion of the regular season. Not discounting what McKinnon has done. Incredible stuff. 127 points, 47 goals, a plus 15 in his last 12 games where he has 22 points. But is he going to be able to hold off Connor McDavid?
Right now, I mean, I got to stick with McDavid. I predicted him to come back and catch these guys before the end of the season, so I got to stick with Connor to win the scoring race here.
So, does me saying McDavid's going to win the scoring race now, does that hold any weight?
That jinxes him.
Could you imagine if McDavid now finished 3rd in the scoring race? So is it 1-2 McKinnon, though, McDavid, or do you think Kucherov is going to have something else to say about that?
I think Kucherov will be up there. But I think he finishes 3rd behind the other 2 in the scoring. I think it's McDavid, McKinnon, then Kucherov by the time everything is said and done at the end of the year.
Just a crazy amount of points. McKinnon, 127. McDavid, 125. Kucherov, 126. 4th in the league is Artemi Panarin with 104. And then Pasternak over with the Boston Bruins has 102 points. So just a wild stark contrast between 3 guys who are leading the league. I should say Panarin had 107 points, not 104 points. But I'm going to go with McDavid. Finally, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. For all you folks out there, I'm an Oilers fan, but I'm jumping on the McDaddy bandwagon to win the NHL regular season scoring race. Now, we're in Manitoba. We're really close to Winnipeg, just about 3.5 hours away. You went to a game earlier this year.
Yep.
Let me remind you who won that game.
Yes, and who won last week as well, too.
I love the Oilers.
Yes.
But things aren't going very well for Manitoba's lone NHL team, the Winnipeg Jets. In fact, things are going pretty dismal as of late.
Ooh, I tell you.
6 in a row losses.
I was in Winnipeg over the weekend, and I'm telling you, I'm surprised they don't have security on some of the big bridges right now in Winnipeg to keep people from jumping off of them. The way fans in Winnipeg are reacting right now to what's happening with this hockey club. It's deja vu all over again for the Jets. I mean, a great first 3 quarters of the season. And now what's going on? 6 losses in a row and pretty much have kissed any chance of finishing top 2 in the Central Division goodbye. Now you're trying to hold off Nashville from becoming a wild card team. This was a team that was challenging for first overall in the league not that long ago. Now in danger of slipping all the way back into being a wild card team and potentially play either the Stars or the Vancouver Canucks in round 1 of the postseason. Maybe outside shot of the Oilers if the Oilers can catch the Canucks between now and a couple of weeks from now. But nonetheless, this is a team that many thought, oh, this is a Stanley Cup favorite. This is a team that's going to go deep. And now all of a sudden, all these people are saying, well, you know what? Oh, this sure looks like last year all over again, when they, of course, went out in round 1 to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights.
Now, granted, the Nashville Predators have went on some sort of unbelievable surge right now. I don't know if there's a hotter team in the National Hockey League, but you look at those 6 losses in a row for Winnipeg, and you take a little bit of a deep dive into it. Kyle Connor, 50 points on the year. He is a minus 10 over his last 7 games. That's just not good enough. Yeah. You go over to Mark Scheifele, 65 points this year. He has a minus 7 over his last 5 games when he only has 1 goal and 1 assist. Neil Pionk on the back end, which clearly is a big part of this team, but he's a big problem right now as he's minus 7 in his last 7 games. A lot of things are patted on wrong right now with the Winnipeg Jets. And then, of course, in net, Connor Hellebuck. They call him Connor Vesnabuck.
Not anymore.
He's not playing very well. And this, I don't know, Jeff, this just seems to be a theme to me. Hellebuck loves to be in the net. He is in the net a ton throughout the first portion of the season, the first third. He's in net a ton during the second third of the season. And then that just continues throughout the season, given Laurent Brossoit, I think, has done a great job as a backup for the Jets. But is it just a case where is Hellebuck just continuing to get tired again? Or why? Because sure, the team in front of him isn't playing very well, but Connor Hellebuck also is giving up a lot of goals that he should not be.
He looked very tired Saturday night. I was watching that game while in Winnipeg on Saturday, and he looked tired on a couple of those goals by the Ottawa Senators. And it's really surprising because one of the big reasons they went out and got Laurent Brossoit in the offseason was that he was supposed to take a lot of those minutes away from Connor Hellebuck so that Hellebuck could be fresh come playoff time. But yet the Jets are once again running Hellebuck into the ground here, it almost seems like, playing him a lot, not giving Brossoit, I think, quite as many starts as many people expected. And that's riding a double-edged sword here. One, not only are you going to run the risk of tiring out Hellebuck here before the postseason, which has happened before with this hockey team, but number 2, you're likely going to have a very unhappy Brossoit and a Laurent Brossoit who will be maybe finding a new address come free agency next season because he didn't get the number of starts that many people were expecting he would get in Winnipeg this year.
So still, Jeff, this Jets team is 44. They won 44 games heading into the week on Monday. They're 44, 24, and 6. Yes, they've been terrible as of late. Connor Hellebuck has not been good. Kyle Connor, who when he's on is sensational. Mark Scheifele having a little bit of a slow patch. The back end hasn't been very good. But heck, I know everybody's hitting the panic mode and thinking like, my goodness, what's going on? How do the Jets get over this? Why is this crap happening again after last year, after such a hot start? But I mean, there's still a pretty sizable amount of the regular season left. They're a 44-win team. There has to be a way for this team to rebound. I know people are saying it's the same story as last year, but I don't know if it's going to be the same chapter for this club.
You've obviously been talking to my brother-in-law, haven't you? My brother-in-law is the eternal optimist when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets. He might be one of the few guys in Winnipeg right now that's trying to settle everybody down and say, hey, things are okay. Playoffs are going to be a different story here and such like that. And I'm waiting to see if that's the case. I mean, they've got... You'd think Ottawa would have been a team they could have beaten on Saturday night and yet found a way to lose that one. This week could be interesting. They've got L.A. Monday night. They've got Seattle coming up, I believe, later on this week as well, too. Some winnable games in that schedule between now and the end of the regular season. But I'll throw this question at you. How have the acquisitions of the likes of Tyler Toffoli, Colin Miller, and guys like that, guys that were supposed to push this team over the top, do you think it's done something to the chemistry? Because this team has not been that good since the trade deadline.
I don't think so. I think you needed to add those players. You needed to add impact players. And yes, it's going to jumble up the lines. It's going to jumble up the chemistry, all the mesh that was created before the trade deadline. But you needed to make moves. So you knew if you were the Winnipeg Jets, you knew changes were coming. It's about adapting to those changes. Perhaps the Jets haven't adapted yet to those changes, bringing those guys in. They're still working their way. But with that being said, I mean, going into Monday, the Jets have played 74 games. You still have half a dozen to get ready for postseason play. And with it, those guys, you got to think they're going to be able to mesh. They're going to be able to gel. Sure, it hasn't worked out as of yet, but you're the Jets. You needed changes. You got those changes. Now it's just about fine-tuning them, I think.
I think that is the case, obviously. Now we'll see, and they just got Gabe Velarde back from injury as well, too. So be curious to see if that maybe reignites that top line, putting them back up there with Scheifele and Connor and gets those guys playing. Now you can shuffle Iafallo down to a spot in the bottom 9 of the lineup somewhere. Continue to work with Monahan and Toffoli, and whether it's Ehlers or whoever's going to be on the left side of that line as well, too. So, yeah, the next couple of weeks, I think, is fine-tuning for the Jets, getting themselves ready here for the postseason.
Jeff, I want to loop back one quick second before we go over to chat with our guest today, the voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers, coming up in just a couple of minutes, but talked about that Vezina Award and Connor Hellebuck. Do you think he, and you posed this question to me earlier, in your opinion, do you think he plays his way out of the Vezina? He's still 32 wins, 243 goals against average, and a .919 save percentage. Sure has not been good as of late, but is there still an outside chance of him winning the Vezina?
I don't know if he wins it. I think there's still a very real possibility he'll be a finalist for it. But I just look at what has happened as of late with UC Saros and the way that he has basically carried the Nashville Predators now on his back over these last couple of months. I look at the season work that Sergei Bobrovsky has done in Florida so far this year. I think those right now are your two front runners when it comes to the Vezina Trophy. Now, if Hellebuck all of a sudden just, flips a switch, wins the next 6 starts all with shutouts or something like that, then yeah, I think you put him back in the race for as a favorite for the Vezina. But right now, I think it's one of either Bobrovsky or Saros. That's your favorite for that award.
When you mentioned Saros wins in 12 of his last 15 games, he's got 32 wins, .906 save percentage, a .253 goals against average. Bobrovsky, 33 wins, a .914 and a .240. Perhaps Igor Shesterkin, backtender of the New York Rangers, 32 wins, a .913 save percentage, and a .263 goals against average. I'm not sure if I could sleep on Alexander Georgiev with the Colorado Avalanche as well, 37 wins and a .901 save percentage and a .285 goals against average. Certainly plenty of excitement coming on down the stretch of the National Hockey League season, but when it comes to a little bit of a lower level, there's a star on the ice in Medicine Hat in Gavin McKenna, but also a star in the broadcast booth. Gino De Paoli joins us in just a moment. We're chatting Western Hockey League. This is the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
Duffy and Henny are coming back with a bang any moment now. Get ready for another round of intense action. Don't miss a beat. Head over to the Heavy Hitters Podcast on Facebook and hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop 24/7.
Welcome back to the show. This is the Heavy Hitters Podcast. Now pleased to be joined by the voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers, Gino De Paoli. Gino, thank you so much for taking the time. I think you're our third guest on the show, so a pleasure to be joined by you today. I know you're getting set for a big Game 3 between the Red Deer Rebels and the Medicine Hat Tigers. But before we get to all that, your time in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, take us back to the grassroots perhaps, and where you came from and how you ultimately moved yourself in the broadcasting world.
Oh boy, that could take the whole podcast. I would like to probably think my road is the road that doesn't have any gravel or anything. It's just mud, and you know what? I take every wrong turn possible. Probably the way it kind of started and began. Obviously, I'm a born and bred Alberta guy from the mighty hamlet of Cayley, Alberta. I was from a farming background with my dad, and then my mom was a teacher. I was an all Canadian athlete for Lethbridge College Kodiaks. And I always just grew up loving sports, loving the Calgary Flames was my team to watch. And Peter Marr was an icon, and not really a mentor or anything, but this guy you wanted to be. And I think from the time I was probably about 8, 9, 10 years old, I kind of knew I wasn't going to be a very good hockey player, period. So I kind of figured out how I could maybe get into it, and really always enjoyed calling games. And so you go through your life and you do some things here and there. And you know what, started with going to SAIT in Calgary, and got the old diploma, and then kind of didn't get a job right away. So I went back and tried to get my degree. And then went off to Saskatchewan, off to the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League in Melfort, Humboldt, and Nipawin. I was based out of CJVR CK750 in Melfort at the time. So we did 3 Junior A teams. I did that for about a year or so, and then kind of transferred over to get back to Alberta. And I went and did some Junior B hockey, actually, in the Northwest Junior B Hockey League with the Whitecourt Wolverines before they became a Junior A team the following year. And called a championship, made a really good relationship with the owner, Brent Stark, at the time. And then kind of wasn't sure where the crossroads was going with me. And I kind of was between a rock and a hard place. I've always been kind of that homebody guy a little bit. And I kind of said, you know what, maybe I can do this a little closer to home. So I always wanted to be close to my family, and that's just a different story for a different day. But, I went back to the University of Calgary to finish my degree, and the opening for the Okotoks Oilers opened up, and I had done color there before moving off to Saskatchewan. And then I kind of applied, and I was a local guy. That was a Golden West radio hire, and they always hire local guys. So I kind of had an in. The only time I probably truly had an in for a while, and then got the call there and stayed there for, good Lord, I guess it was 11 years in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Kind of felt like a little longer than that sometimes with how thick, but I enjoyed every minute of it, being home and finishing my schooling, which was really big for me and my family to get done. And, met my future wife, and, we've got we're trying to start a family here eventually in Okotoks. And, then there was that for 11 years. And then I kind of hit a crossroads where I had to kind of see if I can do this and maybe try and get to the goal of always, I think everybody in this conversation would be the National Hockey League. And you got to do a little bit more of the other thing first. So the opportunity came up one summer afternoon in Turtle Lake, Saskatchewan. Bob Ridley phones me, a guy I've looked up to and became a mentor, and more importantly, a friend over the years, and said, "Hey, do you want to crack at the Tigers job? I'm retiring." I said, "Why are you retiring?" And then he told me why. And I know Bob hadn't been well, but he decided to hang up the headset. I applied, went through the interview process, and here we are. So I'm a seasonal contracted employee with the Manson Tigers, and then I, come back and forth to Okotoks as much as possible, and here we are. We're year 2, and it's been an absolute blast. It's been a blur, and I've seen the top end talented players every night, the Bedards of the world that we got to see. And man, you look at Gavin McKenna, I know we'll probably talk about that later, but just the top 10 anywhere you go, and somebody you want to see every night. Like, you get to see a Berkeley Cat once a year in Spokane, and it's been fun. It's been quite the experience so far, and looking forward for a couple more years out of that.
Now, you mentioned, Gino, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Bob Ridley, in your conversation there. My first question for you is, have the Tigers asked you to start driving the buses of yet?
Oh, God, no. They see me drive, so I don't think so. No, it was always the ongoing joke there. It was fun, and a couple of times we had a couple of substitute drivers, and I kind of looked over at our one assistant coach, who's a farm kid like me, and I said, "Christ, maybe one of us is going to have to drive this thing," and we don't want to, but it's tempted me for a little extra cash. If it's just a short trip to Lethbridge, but I don't think so, there, Jeff.
Now, you mentioned you were the voice of the Okotoks Oilers. You and I, of course, crossed paths many a times in the Alberta Junior Hockey League for several years. I consider you one of my close friends as far as broadcasters go, Gino. Talk a bit about life on the bus in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. You would have done it in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League as well, too. It's a different breed of person that has to be able to jump on that bus on a night-in, night-out basis with a bunch of young hockey kids and such. And you got to love the sport to be able to do that over the course of a winter, don't you, Gino?
Oh, yes, you do. It's even harder when you're my size. I'm about 6'5", and Well, 200. I used to be. Well, I was a little heavier at times, but I was about, like right now about 260, 270 pounds, and it's a long haul. It's something you got to be dialed in and ready, and you learn different ways to sleep or kind of get comfortable or what to do to pass time. But Nintendo Switch was a game changer for me a couple of years ago. I'll tell you that. That's for sure. Lots of movies, lots of books, and lots of work to do because I do the communications with the team too. So it depends on like the day of or something like that. Maybe I'm working for about 3 or 4 hours if we're on a long road trip and prepping there. And the prep I do now, it's kind of all database and I can just look off. It's not as rough as it used to be because the Alberta Junior Hockey League website was never great. It was, you had to do the digging yourself. So I think just recently they'd gone to that. And no, it was a grind. The biggest, bust moment for me, because the South Division, when I was there, it was pretty easy. It was easy because your closest South Division team was Camrose. That was about 3.5 hours. But I had the BC road trip this year with the Western League, going up to Prince George and then coming home that day. That was a long day. I had the U.S. division where it's about 17 hours on a bus and hoping to keep your sanity and crossing the border and data and all that fun stuff. So it is quite the run, and then you got to be ready for it. If you kind of start the day rough, you're going to have a rough ride on the bus. So you got to kind of stay positive at all times and hope things don't get in your way too much, and then just enjoy the ride.
Gino, you mentioned the crossroads and personal inflection and realizing and thinking, am I going to be able to do this? Of course, it's a grind being on the road and when you're starting or trying to start a family. But when you got that call from Bob Ridley and even maybe taking it further to your first Western Hockey League game, how many emotions went into that, knowing that you got your first step and trying to get to the NHL, as you mentioned?
It was kind of an interesting situation, actually, Darnell. I wasn't making money in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and I've always been, as John Keane, the voice of the Canvas Blazers, said, "You're too much of a venture capitalist to be in broadcasting," and I'm no genius at that, but I kind of always tried to make sure I made money. Even when I was into college, I worked in the oil patch in the summer to pay for tuition as much as I could. And I could lighten the blow. I come from a family of privilege. I knew that. But, I never wanted to be tapping into that too much. And when I got that call to Manhattan, it was actually, I was going to get laid off from the job I had, which was a safety consultant with a construction company. And they were really good and promising, but weren't getting any work. And when you don't have work, you can't pay anybody. So then that was an easy one. But I had been up for a job interview for the Tigers at the time. And then there was another job in communications, not in hockey at all. And I had kind of looked at my fiance now and I said, well, this is it. Whether I get this one or not, that will kind of choose it. Call it a higher power, call it the law of averages. The butterfly effect. Someone stepped on a butterfly 20 years ago and it did that. The Tigers offered, the other one didn't. And I went from there and I said, well, let's just 2 years at a time. That was the contract deal I got. And I said, well, let's just go from there. And it was great for, obviously, my fiance's been really supportive of me. I sacrifice a lot. I don't get to see her as much as I should. I know one day I'm going to pay the piper on that one, and I will always be around. But for now, it's just doing it this way, and how can we navigate this? And obviously, looking for opportunities elsewhere. I think the push to get better makes me try to work harder to try to get back, because I know what I've got at home, and I do enjoy Medicine Hat. I really do. I've always, that's a really passionate and loyal franchise. I think at the end of the day, family is, I think, obviously what happened in 2020, family has become pretty damn important for a lot of people. And I always think that, and I always kind of had that. And I don't know if that's maybe made me a little different, or maybe not as dedicated or something like that. But I kind of look at this. It's a good quote from Peter Labardius, one of my mentors and friends. It says, well, we're all going to the same place. So that's a 6 foot motel eventually. So I kind of look at it that way. And I just always want to make sure I'm doing the right thing and, taking care of people that I care about. But it's been exciting, and it's been a lot of hard work, and you hope you get to the next point. And, you got to keep pushing, man. If you want to do this, man, you don't want to take your eye off the prize. Once you do, you may as well stop.
Speaking today with Gino De Paoli, the play-by-play voice for the Medicine Hat Tigers of the Western Hockey League. Before we talk about the dub and about the Tigers, Gino, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you and get your thoughts on the Okotoks Oilers, or one of 5 teams from the Alberta Junior Hockey League that jumped ship to the British Columbia Hockey League during the course of this past hockey season. Your thoughts on that? Were you surprised at all by the move of the Oilers, especially considering they were set to be next year's host for the Centennial Cup?
Well, there's a couple things out of that. I'm not surprised in the sense that they would jump to the BCHL. I think that, I remember, Jeff, you would probably have heard this stuff way long time ago in the early 2000s, the 2010s of oil boom and the Super League that might have been made with and there was Okotoks was in that one with Camrose and I think Fort Mac, Grand Prairie and Spruce Grove or something like that. So this stuff before this isn't new, but it never was going to work financially. And I kind of look at the BC division, I look at the BCHL, and they don't have to wear visors. They don't have all this stuff. And Hockey Canada put down the sanctions. I'm not shooting on Hockey Canada, but they have had their rules of insurance and things like that in place for junior A hockey. And BCHL kind of did what they wanted to do and made their decision that way. And you could kind of see top end prospects from Okotoks leaving. It was Connor Hellier, who would have been their captain this year for Okotoks. He went to Penticton, great program. If you've ever been there, it's pretty easy to go there. But I think that gave them an opportunity to now open up the U.S. players and your import rules, kind of a different story and how you do. I don't know the whole nuts and bolts of it. And I think I look at it as a travel perspective for Okotoks and maybe even Brooks. The North teams obviously was just Sherwood Park and Spruce. You look at your travel, and if I can put 2 and 2 together how it might work. Your travel is not as bad as you think because you're going to stay within your division. So you've got day trips to all those places. No offense to your old stomping grounds, Grand Prairie. That's an 8.5-hour drive.
That's a whole different story.
That's a whole different ball of wax altogether. So I don't mean to bring that up that way. But you know what? You're probably going to play Cranbrook because they'd be the closest BC team. That's 4 hours from Okotoks. You do that in a day trip if you really want to. Or you kind of split up. I guess you would think. I think at the time you probably had Trail and Merritt in there, but then Merritt, obviously this week, I think is pulled out of the BCHL. They're going to go to the KI next year, which whatever. And you've got pieces like that going in there. So I think it might be financially a little bit better for them. And your competition's better. I kind of looked at that as one of the big things when I read it, and I understand the markets that people are in. Olds is going to be tough, but it was boring to go. And when I was calling games in the AJ, I think I made no bones about it. I was tired of calling games against the Calgary Canucks and the old Grizzlies because those organizations probably couldn't financially get the scouting that they wanted. And then, you know what, the product wasn't good and the teams were getting run out, but it was a boring game. And maybe they stole a game once in a while from Okotoks, but it was like this team wasn't connecting. And I look at that still maybe with Canmore, and the Camrose was kind of been slipping a little bit. The Camrose was always a good rivalry with Okotoks. It always was fun. But there was you threw away some games. Like you had your classic Tuesday nighter against Calgary. I thought it was the worst thing ever. So you're getting better competition. You're going to see the Penticton Bees probably like once a year or whatever they're going to do. That's going to draw people in. And I think hosting a Centennial Cup, I remember talking to a good friend of mine, Dean Brockman, when he was the head coach of the Humboldt Broncos. And it was, and I'm paraphrasing here, and it was one of the toughest things to do is host and try and make any money. The cost to do those events are just getting out of control, and look, with interest rates and fuel costs going up, it's hard to make $1 on these events, and time and the energy. Who wants to do it? So I think maybe Okotoks dodged a bullet that way. And I don't have any outside prior knowledge of this, but that's just a guy looking at the big picture. Like, do you want to host an event? It's fine. And you know what? That's just what it is. And you know what? Brooks was going to go. No surprise to me there. They played BC teams hard. Like I remember they had those Penticton series in the Doyle Cup. Like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, I think it's just the changing of the times, and we haven't seen change like that in 30, 40 years in that league. So that was big. And you know, that's kind of what I think is how it's kind of gone. And you know what? We'll see how the chips fall in this summer and into next season, how it looks in all leagues.
Gino, I'm not sure if you have a crystal ball or not, but just how desirable do you think now the BCHL is becoming for guys who are trying to go the college route? Of course, that might change with some decisions coming up in the next little while, and even the fact that with the Merritt Centennials leaving the BCHL to go to the KI and maybe perhaps some other bottom feeder organizations in the BCHL, perhaps they'll be siphoned out to go to KI, JHL, or any other junior A league in British Columbia. How desirable do you think the BC's league is going to be now for top end prospects, not only from Canada, but perhaps south of the border as well?
Well, I think the BCHL has always been doing that. You look at Penticton's roster, there's not that many local guys on their roster. They're pulling the best committed guys. I know the Alberta model is always to have Alberta-born players, but you know what? Unfortunately, that doesn't really work anymore. Like, you're not going to get 23 great Alberta players on each team. It's just not feasible. And you're pulling from all over it. Maybe the Brooks model changed that because they would go to Ontario and grab their Americans. And when they changed sort of the import rules when it came to Western Canada, absolutely, I totally agree that it's a landing spot. Not go to NCAA schools. Playing in Penticton, playing in Salmon Arm. Like, you look at like Victoria or any like Coquitlam might be a cool place to play. I don't know. I'm just naming off names here. And you know what? If you're playing against guys that are all, kind of like a Kent Johnson and Trail and playing with Columbus, like he went that route, and Tyson Jost and I was just trying like Dante Fabro, like those guys kind of made that move. Dylan Holloway was kind of that junior A side for Okotoks, and Cale McCarr and Brooks, and I think that it makes them a lot better. Like, I don't know where it goes from here, but you might be able to kind of tier how your players are ranked. It's a scary game to play, but that's kind of the direction we're going.
Speaking again with Gino De Paoli, the play-by-play voice for the Medicine Hat Tigers. Okay, let's talk Tiger hockey now, Gino. We've held off long enough on that. You've got yourself a pretty special kid down there in Medicine Hat right now by the name of Gavin McKenna that is tearing things up in that Western Hockey League. How much fun is it on a night-to-night basis to see a kid like that perform?
Oh, he's fun to watch. Like, you know what? The hardest part for me as a broadcaster was, trying not to be surprised when he does something. Like, maybe that's the next step in my development, is seeing him stick handle through a phone book and create options and pass off and the Tigers score. He's special. He you know what? It's crazy. He almost could have had 100 points, and he pretty much was 3 points less than what Connor Bedard did in his 16-year-old season. So put those numbers into the universe, and maybe just the way things go in his next 2 years, because obviously he's a late birthday, December 20th. So I remember calling his first game. He got 4 assists in that game against Lethbridge, and it was a 9-1 game, and couldn't even drive a car yet. That to me, that's insane. So I think the hockey IQ is elite. His skating is getting better by the day. It feels like he's passed first, but he also led the team in shots this year, and it's so weird that he could have took more shots. End up with 34 goals. I think he broke a record at that Canada Winter Games out in Moncton, New Brunswick. And you know what? For Team Yukon, he was the Player of the Year in the territories. It's a cool story. Like, and he's such an incredible kid. Like, you know what? He's slowly becoming a pro. And as the comms guy, I've never had to sit him down or anything like that, but I kind of have to talk to him and mention, hey, you got to talk to such and such, and there's rules, and everybody's available in the playoffs. I said, you know what, it's going to be quiet for now, but probably the next 2 years, probably going to have to do a little bit of work we're going to have to do some work together and figure out, because you're going to be a busy guy. And he's taken it in strides. So he's an all-around great player, keeps getting bigger and stronger. It's going to be fun to watch, and how dominating he can be.
Well, Gino's still pretty young, though. Only 2007. Oh, yeah. How does he handle the pressure of, there's some pretty great expectations of him. People are saying he's even going to be better than Connor Bedard, who of course he is related to and is now a star in the National Hockey League. But how is he dealing with the pressures, being such a young man that is off to such a brilliant major junior career?
Well, I think he's in the right place to do it too. In Medicine Hat kind of leaves you alone a little bit. I don't know what Regina was like for Bedard. I know he kind of got mobbed there at the end where, he was under siege with people wanting his autograph at every turn. And I think with Willie Desjardins, he runs a 4-line team, right? He's very balanced that way. So it's not like he's playing as much as Bedard was, but you're utilizing him, making him more successful than he has to be. He is getting those double shifts now. And I think Willie's done a great job of handling the hype, and it hasn't quite got there yet. I know it's going to get there, but it is pretty special. And, he said he had his first radio interview, I think, when he was 12 or 13 years old. So not that long ago. And he's been doing it ever since. So he's done with the pressure well. He's got good leaders in front of him. Like, Rhett Parsons as an alternate captain, Tyler McKenzie, and Drew Krebs, and Oasis Weisblatt, who's his line mate. And, it's not like he's shielded by any means, but he takes it in stride. And, he's put in a good spot to be successful in every single shift. He's not doing the extras. I know I even watching Bedard last year, John Pack rode him quite a bit because he needed him to. So I think that day will probably eventually come when he's in his draft year and even probably next year. But he's done extremely well. And kind of a thing about being related to Connor Bedard, he's not quite as related as everybody thinks that he is. And it's kind of a 6-degree separation by marriage. It's not a true blood relation there. So I know people keep saying it and they're going to do that, but I can tell you that that is the true story of the Connor Bedard and Gavin McKenna thing. It was actually a quote from the newspaper writer for the Mesnet Tigers, James Tubb. The first time they ever met was the first time they played against each other. So that's kind of the relation that they have, which it's cool to see. And you know what? The 6 degrees of separation, go for it. And that's kind of where you look on something like that.
Hey, Gino, before we let you get going here, of course, WHL playoffs now well underway. As we mentioned, the Tigers involved with a great series with the Red Deer Rebels already. That series tied up at 1 game apiece. Any surprises to you so far? I know we're very early in the Dub playoffs, but any surprises that you've seen in any of those opening round series so far?
Ooh, surprises. I guess maybe Prince Albert is the surprise, but that doesn't truly surprise me because they're well coached by Jeff Truitt, going up against Saskatoon. They've split that series going into Game 3, and knew it was going to be dogfight. I think the surprise to me is that nothing has been surprising because there's no Seattles this year. There's no Winnipegs this year in the league. I think everybody has an opportunity to win a series. You look at Brandon would be, they were a shot away from splitting against a really good Moose Jaw team that I thought was going to be as good as any come playoff time. And, there's no surprises to me so far. I think the biggest surprise maybe was the Tigers missing out on Game 1 where they were up 4-0. Maybe is a surprise. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. So, you know what? But that's junior hockey, and I think that's kind of what you'd love all markets to get to is you get those fans in there. Had over 8,000 fans for the first 2 games in Met Hats, and you'd love that. In any market you go to, Brandon almost like 3,000 plus or 4,000 if it's right jam packed, and Saskatoon's had those big crowds, and that's when it gets fun. That's when it gets really fun, and you get better as a broadcaster and calling games when there's emotions and things like that. There's not the 200 people at Max Bell Center between the Okotoks Oilers and the Calgary Canucks. It's, it's thousands of people cheering and screaming and drinking and having a good time. That's my favorite part of junior. And I think if I didn't like that, I wouldn't be doing this today with you. It goes back to, there's not a true surprise yet. I think it hasn't sort of formulated at least through the first 2 games of every series. And that's the best part. It's so fun to watch.
Is there, in your opinion, Gino, is there a team that you think, which team basically what I'm asking is going to win the title this year, or is it, are there a few front runners?
Man, well, you know what? I look in the West, I look at Prince George has done a really good job, especially late in the season. And I think they'd scored 13 goals in their first 2 games against Spokane. And guys like Riley Height and Cohen Zemer hadn't scored a goal yet. So they're pretty deep. Portland, I know, wants to go out on top with Mike Johnston. I don't know if Mike Johnston will be coaching next season. He's kind of moved into that front office and might not coach next year. They're good. Kelowna's been really good of late in the West. But they're split with Wenatchee, who kind of sold off at the deadline. And then the East, that's just a bloodbath, I feel like, from the 1 to 5 seed right now. And you look at Saskatoon, I think they just play keep away so well from everybody. They're very structured. They're very defensively sound. Moose Jaw has so many weapons. Savoy, Furcus and Yager and Matejchuk and Sherman and Jackson Unger, pretty good goaltender there. Lyndon Lakovic and Atlee Calvert, like that is as heavy and strong of a top six as you're going to ask for. And Martin Rice-Savvy there too. And then Swift Current loaded up. They got Connor Geekie, who kind of took over a couple games against the Medicine Hat Tigers, but you know what? They play pretty well in that small building. Reed Dick, really good goaltender. They got that Jaka Dvorak back from Czechia and Owen Pickering. And you go down the list there, Ryan McCleary. Those are good, solid teams, and it's going to be a war. The semifinals can be really neat. If you go in the 1-4, it's Saskatoon, Met Hat, and then it's Moose Jaw, Swift Current, and those are going to be unbelievable series. If it goes that way, of course, we could have upsets. It's cool to see PA doing what they're doing, and I think even Lethbridge in that 2-7 versus Swift, I think they should have won game 2. They didn't. So, you know, there's a lot to be decided. And so if I was to pick, that's tough. I think all roads go to Prince George and probably Saskatoon right now on the 1 seeds. I think just, but depending on how long the series go, will dictate that. Rest is going to be so huge.
Gino, I think it's safe to say we could chat about hockey for hours. However, we have hit our time limit, but it's been, I know Jeff and you go back many years, but myself, this is our first conversation. So it's been awesome getting to know you a little bit. Cool that you're enjoying the journey, the major junior journey, and best of luck to yourself, your family, and then, of course, the Medicine Hat Tigers here as the playoffs continue on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Jeff, always good to talk to you, buddy, and good sort of meeting you from afar there, Darnell.
Gino De Paoli is the voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers. They're tied up 1-1 with the Red Deer Rebels in the first round of the Western Hockey League playoffs. It is March. Well, it's actually April, but we're talking March Madness coming up in a moment. DJ Burns? How about them Duke Blue Devils? My heart is broken. That and more in a moment. This is the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
Get ready, folks. The Heavy Hitters Podcast is about to bring the heat as Duffy and Henny return in just a moment. But here's the kicker. You can be part of the action, too. Want your voice heard on the show? Shoot the boys a message on their Heavy Hitters Facebook page with your burning question, and they'll give you a big shout-out next week when they answer it. But for now, buckle up for more heavy-hitting action with Duffy and Henny.
Welcome back to the podcast, the Heavy Hitters Podcast. This is episode number 5, Jeff?
5 or 6?
I think it's 5 because we missed a couple.
Okay. What a chat there with Gino De Paoli,
Great guy.
The voice of the Medicine Hat Tigers. Great guy. Him and I have been friends for years, going through battles in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. And if you want a guy to talk hockey with, he's one of the best ones to do so.
Yeah, he certainly is. And he gets the chance to call Gavin McKenna on a day-by-day basis.
That's not a bad gig.
Not too bad of a gig. No, it isn't. They're tied up at 1 with the Red Deer Rebels in the first round of the Western Hockey League playoffs. Still 16 teams in that WHL journey. We are down to 4 teams in NCAA March Madness, the national championship. It has been madness. You haven't seen a 16 seed beat a number 1 seed last year when Fairleigh Dickinson beat Purdue. Purdue is now on a tour of redemption after losing that game. They've got themselves into the Final Four. But I want to start with the pressing thing and something you've been looking at me all day about and sort of laughing. You texted me after the game, too.
No, I wasn't laughing. Come on. I was pulling for you guys. You and Dean. I was pulling for both of you guys for Duke to get through into the Final Four here.
Was there not a little piece of you that thought, oh, that's pretty sweet when they lost?
No, not at all. I wanted to see the Blue Devils there. I wanted to see Duke in that Final Four.
I'm not giving you enough credit.
For no reason except for just to have you and my good friend Dean Radbourne happy, because I know, and I've already seen it on Facebook, Dean has taken a massive chirping ever since Duke got eliminated on Sunday.
Dean, I'm sorry. Next year, Duke Blue Devils 2025. Book it. Probably be wrong again. The big reason the Duke Blue Devils are out of this tournament is they started the second half. They were actually up at the half. Started the second half by going 5 for 23. Kyle Filipowski ended up being fouled out down the stretch. He wasn't fantastic. He's a first-round draft pick likely in the NBA draft, so he's going to have a long and successful career. But I think one of the biggest reasons they're out, and in my opinion, one of the biggest headlines and feel-good stories of the tournament is DJ Burns. has dominated this tournament, 18.3 points per game. He played his high school at York Preparatory, where he had 3 seasons. He had more than 1,000 points and 1,000 rebounds. 6'11", coming in at 275 pounds. The big boy on the court has eyes on the back of his head, it appears, and just seems like a big old teddy bear that gets down to business, gets the job done, and he always has a smile on his face. It's pretty incredible stuff, and that's one of my most enjoyable parts about March Madness. Of course, I hate that Duke loses, but all the great stories that come along with it.
As DJ, could we call him the next Bryant Big Country Reeves? I mean, just as far as like his size and his basketball playing ability and such like that, just hopefully it can translate into the pro game better than it did for Big Country. But great story there to see NC State. They get into the tournament as a tournament winner by winning the ACC tournament, end up as the number 11 seed in their district, and end up going all the way now to the Final Four. First time since Coach V led them to the championship, Jim Valvano, back in 1983. And you know Coach V is smiling from up above watching his Wolfpack finally get back to the big dance. And could they be the Cinderella story that takes it all? I mean, there's some great stories in this Final Four. You've got NC State, the massive underdog. You've got Purdue, as you mentioned, already working well into this redemption tour after going out in round 1 last year as a number 1 seed. And you've got the defending champions still alive going into the Final Four.
Now, NC State has beat some real good basketball teams to get here. First of all, 5 in a row in the ACC conference. They beat Texas Tech, then Oakland, then Marquette, and of course Duke over the weekend. But, as you mentioned, they're still going to be the heavy underdogs, especially because they're going up against a team that is projected to already be in the finals in Purdue, led by the 7'4" Canadian in Zach Edey, who, in my opinion, is the best player in college basketball.
The man they now call Shaq Edey. Or was that Shaq himself that's calling him Shaq Edey?
And that's, honestly, Jeff, that's kind of the part that's bugging me, because there's so much talk about everybody's agreeing how good of a college basketball player is. You look at game 1, had 30 points, 21 rebounds. Game 2, 23 points, 14 rebounds. 27 points, 14 rebounds in the third game for Purdue, and then had 40 points against Tennessee, a very good defensive team in the Volunteers, and he had 16 points, or 16 rebounds, I should say, as well. But so many people are saying he's not going to amount to anything when it comes to the NBA because he's too big, he's slow, he can't shoot the ball. So many people are being so pessimistic and so hated on the man, when all they should be doing is enjoying a magical journey and him dominating one of the best tournaments in the world.
I mean, it's a, for lack of a better term, it's a crapshoot when you get to the NBA. There are very few guys, Michael Jordan, LeBron James would be the exceptions, that are sure bets when they get to the NBA. We love to think that a lot of guys are going to be sure bets, and they just don't turn out that way, guaranteed. So, I mean, maybe Zach doesn't work out in the NBA. Maybe his game doesn't translate into the NBA. Let's not shit on what he's doing right now here. Let's enjoy the run that he's having, and let's enjoy what's going to be some great games coming up this weekend in the Final Four.
Now let's go to the other side. Connecticut against Alabama. Connecticut's won 5 games this year. They've lost just 4. They've had at least a 30-point lead in every game of this year's March Madness. Last year, they won all 6 by at least 13. They've only given up in their 4 games. Game 1, 52. Game 2, 58. Game 3 and Game 4 combined, they only gave up 104 points. This is the best defensive team in the tournament. This is also a very good offensive team. They're going up against the Alabama Crimson Tide. The Tide have given up 96 points, 61, 87, and they gave up 82 against the Clemson Tigers in their Elite 8 matchup. You're putting up going up against a Connecticut team that can shoot the ball and they can play great defense. How does Alabama tame this Tide that is rolling in the Huskies?
If everyone is talking about Purdue being a slam dunk to get into the final or into the NCAA championship, what are they saying about Connecticut when they're putting numbers up like that? I mean, that would be my for sure bet to get into the championship game a week from tonight, seeing the University of Connecticut get into that game with just those numbers alone. And again, the fact they're the defending champions, they've gone through this gauntlet and gone through it successfully. You want to talk about potential for massive upsets. If the Crimson Tide can keep this one close and win this one in the end, that might be. I mean, sure, they were a 4 seed going into their regional, but that might be considered one of the biggest upsets when it comes to NCAA college basketball history.
Now, we talk about the great stories. DJ Burns coming with NC State. Now, Jaron Stevenson should still be a senior in high school, but in grade 11, he decided to go into some extra courses to get some extra opportunities to graduate early. He did that exact thing. He's now playing for Alabama. He had 18 points against Clemson in their Elite 8 matchup for a guy who should still be in high school. That's just another incredible story. Let's not forget Alabama also shoots 41.4% behind the arc. But Connecticut, a gauntlet. They had 30 straight points against Illinois over the weekend. After the first half, it was really tight. Connecticut has lost only once since Christmas. They're dismantling teams. Is it? I know we all love the underdog story, the upsets, but Jeff, let's just be realistic here. I don't know if Alabama can beat Connecticut. Perhaps NC State could beat Purdue, but Connecticut, I don't know how they lose in this tournament.
I think the bigger upset would be Alabama beating Connecticut if it were to happen. I could see a case for NC State getting by Purdue and getting to the championship, just the way that the run that NC State has been on here over the last several weeks of the season. But that Connecticut squad is just way too tough. Whoever comes out of that other semifinal, NC State and Purdue, it's going to be a heck of a battle going up against Connecticut. That is a team that's definitely hungry to go back-to-back, something that, as I mentioned I think a couple weeks ago, that just doesn't happen when it comes to U.S. college basketball. You have guys that are coming out of college early to go into the NBA draft. You don't see these programs carry over championship squads from year in and year out. So what Connecticut is doing is a pretty special thing. And I'd love to see maybe Zach Edey have a chance at a national championship and go head-to-head against Connecticut and maybe come out on top. I just don't see it happening. I think this is Connecticut's tournament to lose.
You're taking Connecticut. I'm gonna take the Canadian Zach Edey. He's dominated this tournament. I think they're going to beat NC State. I think for the national title game to be any good, it has to be Purdue.
Yeah.
Because I think Connecticut will run all over NC State, as I think they're going to beat Alabama, but probably in that 14 to 18 point range. I think they're just too good defensively, and offensively, they're very efficient as well. You're going Connecticut. I am going Purdue. So in a week from today, Jeff, some chirping rights are up for grabs. I'm pretty bad, though. Like, historically, when I predict things, they just don't happen.
You did predict the Oilers to beat the Jets, though.
Yeah.
I will continue to give you props for that.
1 for 100.
But, it's going to be interesting because Purdue is trying to do exactly what... Is it Vermont, Virginia? Who was the school that lost?
Virginia, that
lost to a 16 seed, and then the following year went on their run and won the national championship. Purdue trying to do likewise. They lost to a number 16 seed last year in the first round. Now coming in and making the Final Four with a very good chance of being in that national championship game. It'll be interesting to see if lightning can strike twice in that instance. But I don't think Vermont had a team like University of Connecticut to have to go up against in their championship run this year. And that's a big hurdle that Purdue or NC State, whoever comes out of that semifinal, is going to have come the championship game.
I would feel very wrong if we did not give some love to March Madness on the women's side. We're now at the Final Four. You talk about Caitlin Clark, who is now the leading scorer in Division I basketball when it comes to men's or women's. She's playing in the Final Four. You got Paige Beckers also in the Final Four with Connecticut. You got Juju Watkins with the University of South Carolina and Angel Reese of LSU. women's basketball is in a really, really good spot right now. The fans are loving it, and I am a big fan of it.
How about that matchup, LSU and Iowa? An Elite Eight matchup to determine who's going to go to the Final Four. That was your national championship last year.
And some bad blood there was last year. Although Clark has since come out and said we don't have a hate on for each other.
Both of them have said that.
It's not personal.
Yeah.
It's coming down to basketball at the end of the day. But talk about a performance or talk about a matchup. I love this Caitlin Clark, who's been offered $5 million to go to the Big Three, which is a huge sum of money comparatively what she'll get in the WNBA. But I think it's right now just about relishing what is going on at the college ranks, and women's basketball is in a really good spot, headlined by these stars.
Can you imagine USA women's basketball in a couple of years here when you've got Caitlin Clark, Reese, and let's not forget, you've got Sabrina Ionescu, who's already lighting things up in the WNBA as well, too. The U.S. is going to be scary when it comes to women's basketball in a few years.
Filthy. The madness is well underway. The madness is shortly coming to an end, but it certainly has been fun. And despite the heartbreak, I'm still blue. Go Duke Blue Devils, just the 2025 edition of the Devils. So, Jeff, thanks for popping by, joining me once again. This is our podcast. We have fun with it.
You bet.
And why don't we come back next week and do it again?
You got her. See you folks in 7.
Lots to chat about. We'll take a break for now, but we will be back to chat with you around the clock on the Heavy Hitters Podcast.
That's a wrap for this week on the Heavy Hitters Podcast. Don't forget to give the guys a follow on Twitter at It's the Duffy One and JHenson73. You can also keep up to date with the podcast by visiting the Heavy Hitter Podcast on Facebook. Duffy and Henny will return next week, but for now, keep it real and keep it heavy hitting.